A
Hello.
hearty good
Good,
afternoon and welcome to a
good
session
afternoon.
on It's Time to Start Solids to My Baby and When and How. We're glad to have Dr. Satish Reddy among us today to help us understand this topic. Now, nutrition for children is an essential part of growing up, and it's a time when the newborn's brain, body, and immune system develop significantly, especially in the times the child starts solid food. The doctor will help us understand more about this nutrition for this crucial stage. So, if you have any questions or specific concerns, feel free to ask your questions to the doctor. Doctor, you have the stage.
Yeah, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Dr. Satish. I'm a consultant neonatologist and pediatrician at Apollo Cradle, Brookfield, Marathahalli. So today, as this being a nutrition month, today I would likely add on to the topic of how to start solids, when and how. And most of the whatever pediatric cases we get, most of the mothers are concerned about how to start, when to start, what to feed the baby, how much to feed. So today our session, I would like to briefly discuss about the same. So so why should we speak about it? First of all, we should know why it is so important to speak about the solid foods and so India, we have a lot of undernutrition cases associated, and like in iron deficiency anemia is around 70% earlier. Now also it is around 59%. Even being so updated and so urban, we are still lacking in the nutrition part. So still it is associated with around 59% of the births, and 59% of the children are still suffering with it. Around less than 25% of the children, 6 to 24 months of children, receive foods that meet the required daily requirement. Out of 100%, I would like to say like less than 25% receive the adequate amount of food. And iron deficiency anemia is prevalent in 59% of the children in less than 5 year old. So coming to solid food, so what is solid food? Or I would like to quote a statement like we can say it as a complementary feeding. Why complementary? Like earlier, we used to call it as a weaning food. In fact, the term weaning is no longer used because we are not weaning off completely from the breastfeeding. We're trying to complement or add extra foods to the additional breastfeeding. So, so it is known as complementary feeding. So it is nothing but when breast milk alone is no longer sufficient to meet the nutritional requirement of the kid, infants, then we would start with some extra foods along with the breast milk. It is known as complementary feeding or starting with solids. So generally, the period of transition from exclusive breastfeeding to family food starts from anywhere between 6 months to 23 months. So, coming to the ideal characteristics of a good and ideal complementary foods, when to be started, whether it is to be early or delayed, or it is adequate or appropriate to feed, what is the appropriate time to feed. So, when to start? The time is like around 5 to 6 months when the need for energy and nutrients exceeds what can be provided only through the breastfeeding. So early 4 to 5 months, the breast will like only breastfeeding will be sufficient for the babies. Post 5 to 6 months, then they need additional nutrition which is not met with the breast milk. So the characteristics are timely introduction and adequate amount of energy, protein. It should contain adequate amount of energy, protein, micronutrition to meet the growing child's nutritional needs. And it should be hygienically prepared, stored, and fed. And it should be age appropriate texture also. So I'll discuss one by one. So why are we more worried about period of complementary feeding? We know why it is so important. So what we call from birth to 2 years of age, it is known as critical window for the promotion of optimal growth and development. It is very crucial phase for brain development. Also, it is a time where child develops healthy food preferences and feeding practices, and it is also a peak age of growth flattering and micronutrient deficiency, common illnesses like diarrhea. And what happens once we are not up to date, and if we delay or something, or if we are not adequately giving the food, if it is not adequate, then the baby may stunt. And once the stunting is done, we can't reverse the stunting once if it occurs. So, what are the immediate results when we don't start the complementary feeding or weaning when it has to be done? So the immediate consequences might be illnesses with some morbidity and even mortality also. And there might be delay in development due to the nutrient deficiencies. So what are the long term complications would be impairments in intellect, work capacity, and reproductive outcomes too. So coming to complement to solid foods, when to start? Like whether I am too early, whether I am too late, what is the ideal time? So ideal time I would like to say it completed 5 months of age child is developmentally ready, or around 6 months of age it is two ideal requirements, like around 6 months the requirements for energy, protein, as I said earlier, and other nutrients like iron, zinc cannot be met by breast milk alone. So after 4 months, generally the our intestine and the renal function is more mature. After 5 months, the tongue thrust reflex is lost. Baby is ready to sit with support. There is a good head and neck control, and they might open and they will open their mouth for food and reach for objects also. So around 5 completed months of age is the ideal age. When the babies reach 6 or 5 completed months of age. So what happens if we start early? Or what happens if we start late? So a very early introduction, where like before, some parents are very keen, like once the baby child starts mouthing, when they start putting fingers into mouth, which generally happens at around 2 to 3 months of age, then they think that child is quite ready and is hungry and my breast milk is not enough for the baby and baby needs some extra food. So they prefer to start earlier. It is either wise. Some parents start too early, some start too late, and those who are in touch with the pediatricians or some people will start at adequate time too. So what happens if we start early? Early introduction of complementary foods will increase the risk of childhood obesity. Also, it might increase the risk of eczema and respiratory symptoms too. And delaying leads to malnutrition. As I said, once the stunting occurs, once the growth deficiency occurs, sometimes it may not be reversed. So developmental readiness itself is not an indication. Even is gut maturity and other functions have to be taken care. So feeding recommendations generally we don't consider are for populations, but each child is different and each child has to be managed as an individual. And it would be better if you consult your pediatrician before starting the food. It cannot be done like it would be a good practice to start with the healthcare practitioner advice. Like immunizations and growth go hand in hand. Your pediatrician will assess the immunization, development, height, weight, and everything, and he needs to see his child growth and development. So he will look at adequate age and the readiness of the child to start. So how much amount of food? So like now we are ready, we know when to start the food. So ideal is after 5 months of completed age. So we know what age to start now. How much amount of food is to be given to the child as a complementary feed? Okay. So it is not like it is not alone how much child takes. It is based on some science too. So amount of food required for a 6 to 8 month old kid, the amount of calorie requires is 600 kilocalories per day, out of which 200 from complementary feed it should come, and the rest 400 can be taken care by the breast milk. So at 9 to 11 months of age, 700 kilocalorie per day he needs, out of which 300 comes from complementary feeds of the solids. And as he grows up around 12 to 2 years of age, he needs 900 kilocalories per day, out of which half has to come from solids. So it is also depends on based on responsive feeding, and how what should be the density, what should be the frequency, we'll discuss it. So often we get the question from others, can how can I make my complementary feed, how can I increase the solid food make more dense without increasing the volume? So that's a good question. So that can be done by adding fats in the sense ghee, some amount of ghee, like 1.5 teaspoon to 1 teaspoon of ghee. Later, once the baby starts initial solids, once you start with the initial solids, then slowly we can add some ghee to the food, which will make it energy dense. Also in Indian population, some rural population, they might add like sugar. Generally, we prefer adding sugar and salt after 1 year of age. But for a pinch in developing countries, as malnutrition includes energy deficit, so Small amount of sugars are permitted, like sugar and jaggery for taste are permitted in food. And another thing is malted foods like germinated cereal or pearls, drying or grinding, which reduces viscosity and hence the child can eat more. And thick mixtures also you can give. So there is something called minimal acceptable diet, MAD, minimal acceptable diet, minimal meal frequency or acceptable diet. WHO has divided it into 7 groups. So group one is grains, roots, and tubers. Group two is legumes and nuts, and group three is dairy products. Group four is flesh foods like meat, fish, poultry, and other. Group five is eggs. Group 6 is vitamin A rich fruits and vegetables, and group 7 is other fruits and vegetables. So there are totally 7 groups. I would like to say like includes greens, nuts, pulses, dairy products, flesh foods, eggs, and vitamin A rich diets. And the 7th group is other fruits and vegetables. So out of these 7 groups, at least the child should have 4 out of 7 groups each day. Like his meal should comprise of green leafy vegetables too, legumes, nuts, or a dairy products, and eggs or other meats. At least out of the 7, he has to have 4 out of 7 groups per day. So, but where do we think India lies in this minimal acceptable diet? So India only has around 9.6% of the children getting the minimal acceptable diet. So so how to monitor the nutrient intake? There is something called recommended dietary allowance (RDA), estimated average requirement, and there are some problem nutrients. These are called problem nutrients because these are very crucial out of if it is not supplemented in adequate like iron, zinc, vitamin B6, these if calcium and vitamin A, if these are not supplemented in nutrition, they hamper the growth and development. So these are essential nutrition come problem nutrition and nutrients if not given in an adequate quantity. So we can't go overboard. There is some specific set of nutrient composition how much to give. It's like lipid should be around 30 to 45% of the entire thing, and protein should be 8 to 15%, and the rest should be carbs. So micronutrients, among micronutrient, 97% of iron, 86% of zinc, phosphorus, sodium, and calcium are included. 72% of the calcium during 9 to 12 months are expected from complementary feeds. So what happens? Why is iron? Why? What are the problem nutrients? And what happens if a baby is not supplemented with solid foods? And if he is on alone on breastfeeds, then he is likely to end up with iron deficiency anemia. As I said, it's a problem nutrient. How important it is. So generally, like in breast milk, it contains less of iron, and foods containing heme iron as first food, combining iron-rich cereals with vitamin C-rich foods or iron fortification or supplementation is quite important in the first year of life. So it has even effect on neurocognitive developmental, like brain development also. Even before anemia, like we think if we don't have iron, we alone have anemia. No, it's not like that. So it impacts our brain development and it has an impact on neurocognitive effects before anemia. So, what is the consistency of food? So we came to know that how what is what like how much has to be lipid, how much has to be protein. So out of which next comes consistency. Consistency is whether I have to prepare a thin food, whether a thick food, or what we eat, family food like solid food. How we have to go. So starting with we have to start with a very thin consistency. I like to say like purees. And then gradually like initially to start with purees slow introduction and gradually increase the consistency first 5 to 7 months you can give puree mashed foods, then slowly you can increase the consistency by 7 to 9 months, 9 months, and then at around 8 months they can have finger foods, by 12 months they can have the family foods. So another thing to keep in mind is avoid foods which may cause choking. Like you can avoid peanuts, pomegranate grains, or whichever are in a grain size. You should not give it directly. In the initial few months, it would be better to give the food in a very thin puriform. Then you can increase a bit of consistency. Then you can go for a 12 months, one first birthday. You can go for a family foods. So, childs who were first received lumpy foods after 10 months of age were more likely to have feeding difficulties at 15 months than like what happens. Some parents they say the child is only having the puriform and is not at all having the solid consistency. So it's good to increase the consistency slowly. Even if you give puriforms after 10 months, if you keep on giving, what happens is when the child is ready for solids, later part of life at feeding difficulties, they will have feeding difficulties in the second year of life if it is on completely on puriform in the first year of life. So so how it is like some parents will feel that the food is not tasty for me, so baby will also not taste this. No, it's not like that. Baby has their own taste buds, so it's different from what you feel and what the baby feels. So how would be the sequence of introduction? There is no evidence for any specific sequence. Since iron and zinc are critical foods, and foods such as meat and grains are the best choice to start the process. First, solid foods are individual, boiled without salt, sweeteners, flavors, and preservative. It would be rather great to start with home food rather than giving him some formula feeds or Cerelac. So, first, solid foods are individual, boiled, and without salt. Like in Indian context, we can say the parents can start with ragi or rice purees, which can be grinded well in a bit puree form. It should be a gradual introduction, not like I am starting solids today, so I will give whole bunch of variety of foods. No, it's not like that. It is gradually start it. Like it has to be one food at a time in the initial few days, or 2 to 3 days. You see how the child digests the food, how he is coping up with it, then forms the variety of foods like then ragi rice, then can slowly slowly go off for the next set of foods. Like you can boil apple purees, purees can be given. And one, that's what, as I said, one food at the intervals of 2 to 3 days, so that in a short span infant will be consuming the primary food groups like cereals, vegetables, fruits, and legumes. So water. So coming to like, okay, I'm happy with the solid food. So what happens with, so another concern would be water. How how much the child has to consume water. What is the water requirement? Whether I have to start water along with food. What is the requirement? So in the initial 6 to 8 months, you need not very much. So because as the child will be also an additional EBM, so it does not require nothing anything much. As the growth requirement increases, as he grows up, or if you are staying in a tropical climate, then like needs of water is influenced by thermoregulation, especially I mean like climate and physical activity. So milk contains 88% of water. Additional water intake during the second half of infancy is not needed until all three recommended daily complementary meals are introduced. Like initial phase, like as I said, 6 to 8 months can go bit slow. Later, once he is on like three feeds, more feeds, then he may need more water. Non-breast breastfed infants need 400 to 600 ml per day in temperate climates, and in tropical climate, as in India, it might go up to 800 to 1200 ml per day. Initially, you can start water with a sipper 10 to 20 ml post food, gradual introduction, and slowly you can increase it. Um, so, um, so what happens if your child? So some parents are not convenient. Like some parents might be vegetarians and some are non-vegetarian. What happens if you are only strict vegetarians? So in such cases, like critical nutrients like B12, calcium, vitamin D, iron, and omega 3 fatty acids and zinc might be bit low in some of the vegetarian diets. In such case, like in such cases, If you are a pure vegetarian and if you are not supplying adequate amounts of iron and calcium and other nutrients, you may land up in growth failure and deficiencies. So you have to ideally, like in India, we supplement 3 months of iron in one year period, so that we don't see the deficiency of iron in even in vegetarian eaters. So, coming to allergenic food, deliberate delayed introduction of potentially allergenic food may increase the risk of allergy. So, sorry. So, gradual introduction, whatever the allergen source is also there. Gradually, you have to introduce and see how allergic is to food. Potential food allergens are recommended when complementary feeding begins, one food at a time, and so it is like complementary feeding is not same for all babies. We have some preterm babies also. So in preterm babies, based on baby's development, we have to see when to introduce it. Definitely, it's not before 4 months of age, after the expected date of delivery. In preterms, ideally the pediatrician has to see and assess the development and readiness of the baby. Then only he can be started with solid foods. So some parents prefer giving more milk, and if they are not on breast milk and some amount of formula feeds, so so till what time the breastfeed has to be continued. So along with complementary feeding, it's a good practice to continue the breastfeed ideally for at least 2 years of age and beyond if needed. Beyond also you can go on, but ideally the period should be around 2 years. Breast milk along with complementary feeds. So and AAP and even the recommendations doesn't suggest of giving any unmodified animal milk before 1 year of age. Generally, we avoid giving cow milk before 1 year of age. So for WHO and for WHO recommends, but in some cases, like if in non-breastfed children, it varies. It can be introduced depends on their tolerability. So it has to be assessed again. So there is something called baby-led weaning, which emphasizes more on self-feeding instead of spoon-feeding by caregivers. So, which baby-led interaction generally encourages consumption of iron and energy-rich foods without risk of choking. So, what are the foods now? We came to know that when to start, what has to be the consistency, when is to be the water intake, what is the ideal water intake, and now coming to the foods which has to be avoided. So there are some foods like small hard foods which may cause choking, such as whole nuts, seeds, hard lollies, and raw carrot, chunks of apple. If you give directly at 6 or 8 months of age, like rather than purees, if you are going ahead with raw chunks of apple, raw carrot, or whole nuts, then there is a risk of choking. And also, there is a risk of choking. There is no need to add sugar or salt to foods. They can cause teeth decay and can make extra work for babies' kidneys. Like in developing countries, as I said, I insisted it has to be ideally started off after 1 year of age. But for taste, a pinch can be added, particularly in developing countries where sugar is accepted to increase the caloric density. And as I insisted again, I'll repeat it: cow's milk should not be given as a drink until 12 months of age. But some cow's milk can be added to the food to help with puring or mashing the food. And another is honey is not needed and cause illnesses in babies younger than 12 months of age. It is unsafe to use honey as a sweetener or dummies or bottles. And even soft drinks, fruit juices, tea, and coffee are not suitable drink for babies. Breast milk and water are the only fluids that babies need. So we had done with the consistency and what should food should be avoided. Now we'll go ahead with and see what is the duration and quantity of meals the baby has to take. So it is generally variable, but duration should be 20 to 30 minutes. Appropriate once complementary feeding is established. So as the 6 to 8 months of age, maximum amount of food per meal is 1/4 to half cup, like it contains 60 to 120 gram, and amount of liquid accompanying milk accompanying solid should be around 130 to 180 ml, and around 9 to 11 months the gastric capacity is 285 grams, so half cup, which is 120 grams, is what they require in each feed. And accompanying liquids or breast milk should be 160 ml with the food. And around second year of life, it should be 3/4 to 1 cup, which compromises again, and water intake or liquid intake can be 100 to 200 ml accompanying the solids. So they are also, what if my baby is spilling and he is not at all having, so and he's messing up with food, he's throwing away. So spillage is allowed, spillage is okay, messiness is fine. Mm, messiness, throwing, playing during eating, those are all like what does those are all the things that child does. Okay, it is okay. They can spill. They are not every child is made perfect or something. Their development starts at then, and they can't be perfect. They will spill. They will throw. They will play while eating. They'll split it. That's how the child will learn. And encourage self-feeding despite spillage in the later part of second year. And when the child is refusing, experiment with the combination, tastes, and textures. Do not threaten or force feed the child and punish the child for eating. So many parents we come across who says that the child, like he has on and off, like 1 week they will eat, 1 week they won't. When the child doesn't eat, don't threaten him, don't force feed him, don't punish him for not eating. Minimize distractions like screen time, mobiles during feeding. And feeding has to be, ideally the duration has to be, as I said, 20 to 30 minutes. It has to be not prolonged enough with the phone and distractions beyond 1 hour or beyond 45 minutes. Feeding time periods are periods for learning and love too, it helps the bonding from mother to child also. So apart from I'm breastfeeding my baby, I'm giving solid foods. What else? What else? What are the supplements or fortifications are needed? So the additional supplements should be what we give in Indian context: vitamin D supplementation, which is 400 units till 1 year of age, as breast milk lacks, and when the child is not much exposed to sunlight. In the first 1 year of age, the routine supplementation is 400 units till 1 year of age. And if it is a preterm baby, then supplemental iron starts in from the initial after 1 month of age only. In a term baby, as I said, it can be given for iron can be given after starting the solid foods 3 months at least in 1 year of age. And I would like to clear some of the myths which are associated with the solid foods. So they are like stop log that meat can't be given. There is a myth that fruits and vegetables are the best fast foods. Yes, they are the best fast foods or probably iron-rich foods. Whatever the fruits and vegetables which contain iron, they are the healthy foods. It is not like meat can't be given in kids. It can be given in a proper consistency. It can be gradually introduced, like pureed meat, iron-fortified cereals, and grains are okay. And most of the parents, some of the parents think that food before one is just for fun. No, it's not like that. So more than 855 of micronutrients are alone from your solids or complementary feeding, apart from best feeding. So baby almost receives more than 50% of the energy, and majority of micronutrients are from complementary feeding, which helps their development. The first 2 years is a quite crucial. First 1,000 days of life is quite crucial for brain development. So micronutrients are quite essential for the brain development. And as I said, more than 50% of the energy comes from complementary feeding. So it is never like food before one is never for fun. And baby is ready for solids by 4 months? No, it's not. Even if ready without seeing or examining the baby, it is not good practice to start the food developmental readiness. And along with that, we have to see where the child is falling, what is the child's growth, and after consulting a healthcare practitioner, it would be wise to start solid foods. And baby-led weaning causes will cause choking. No, it's not so. So there is no increased risk of choking. Gag when they try to vomit or do something. That is not an indication of choking hazard. And the biggest myth is babies need teeth to chew solids. No, it can't be so. So there is nature is such a made such a beautiful even without teeth, baby are ready for solids. They can chew with gums, especially the posterior part, which is quite strong. And another myth is liquids like soup, dal water, rice water are good. Only giving liquids is not advisable. Practically need to give three times the stomach capacity. Not possible. Like liquids, if you are giving, you have to give three times of the stomach capacity, which is not possible. So at least we have to give energy density. It has to be proper balance between solids and liquids. Energy density should be gradually increased, and the food should be energy dense along with liquids. And so fruit juices are a great way to start complementary foods. No, humans have an innate preference for sweet foods, hence they may displace whole fruits and the bitter vegetables. So it's not like that. So all kinds of fruits have to be given, and excess fruit juices have to be avoided, which may lead to diarrhea, growth failure, short stature, even in obesity. Okay. And typical grandma's teaching no egg whites or no nuts before 3 years. No, it's not so. Egg including white can be started once complementary feeding is started. Nuts also can be given, but just not in whole form. As I said, it may increase the risk for choking. So to conclude, so whenever you go for there should be you should be knowing when has to be the complementary food solid foods has to be introduced, how, what is the consistency, what is the frequency, and nutrition education, like what amount of lipids, what amount of proteins has to be given, and mother has to be properly counseled, maternal counseling has to be done for the right amount, like what we start with the first solid foods, then it will go on for the next few years. So the good start will ensure that everything will go smooth and the baby's growth won't be hampered. And regular growth monitoring has to be done. So I would say like there is a no magical bullet for improving complementary feeding, but definitely a well planned approach can be highly effective. Thank you. I would like to conclude my session. If any questions or anything, you can just put up me in comment box. So if you need questions, would be happy to take the questions. Okay, then if anything is there, you can leave the comment questions in comment sections. So we'll be concluding the session. Thank you for the time.